Hi everyone, so today I'm talking about the new foundation from Tarte, new-ish. I think they released another foundation since this one came out, but it's the Tarte Face Tape. It was, since the Shape Tape foundation was a complete flop due to shade range inadequacies and lots of drama, rightly so. We gotta hold these foundation lines, companies accountable for their absolutely awful shade ranges when it comes to people of color. Anyway, they redid the foundation and they released this. It has a better shade range. It has 50 shades in it. I have the shade 8S, which is the lightest yellow undertone foundation. There is an 8B Porcelain Beige, and this is Porcelain Sand. 8B also is the lightest shade in the Tarte Shape Tape Concealer. I did a Get Ready With Me with this and I used the Tarte Concealer. I feel like the 8B Concealer actually looked a little bit light under my eyes with this, and it may just be because the undertone difference. This is more of a yellow tone shade and that one is a little bit neutral to cool. So before I get too far into things, let's take a look at the swatches. We can see how this color compares to other foundations in my collection, and then we can come back and chat a little bit more about skin type and testing and all that good stuff. All right, these have started to dry, but for the most part they are wet. MAC Studio Fix Fluid in NC10, Tarte Face Tape in 8S Porcelain Sand, Tarte Shape Tape Concealer in 8B Porcelain Beige, Tarte Shape Tape Concealer in Fair, Makeup Revolution Conceal and Define Foundation in F0.2, a good shade match for me. Clinique Even Better in CN0.5 Shell, a good shade match for me. NARS Sheer Glow in Siberia. L'Oreal Infallible Fresh Wear in 400 Pearl. L'Oreal True Match in W0.5 Creamy Ivory. Fenty Pro Filt'r Soft Matte in 105. And Flower Light Illusion in L0 Shell, which is their new lightest shade. So for me, NC10 oxidizes quite a lot and it's a little bit dark to begin with, but then as it dries, it gets darker, and then throughout the day it gets darker. Pretty much all of these are things that I can wear. Obviously the Flower Beauty is a little bit more orangey than what I normally would wear, but I feel like when it's dewy, it's a little bit easier to fudge because you don't see the color as much because it's reflecting all this light. And it's funny, like the past 6 months or so, I feel like there have been a lot more pale yellow undertone foundations, which is awesome because for a long time, Siberia was really kind of out there on its own. All right, so these are mostly dry. I think the most noticeable differences are in the concealers. They really do change quite a lot. Also, the Studio Fix Fluid, I feel like darkens a fair bit. And everything else I think will get maybe a tiny bit darker, but it's really not super noticeable. So the face tape did get a little bit darker, but not significantly. MAC Studio Fix Fluid in NC10, Tarte Face Tape in 8S Porcelain Sand, Tarte Shape Tape in 8B Porcelain Beige, Tarte Shape Tape in Fair, Makeup Revolution Conceal and Define in F0.2. I think F0.3 is probably similar to a little bit closer to the face tape in 8S once it dries down. Clinique Even Better in CN0.5 Shell, NARS Sheer Glow in Siberia, L'Oreal Infallible Fresh Wear in 400 Pearl, L'Oreal True Match in W0.5, Fenty Pro Filt'r Soft Matte in 105, and Flower Beauty Light Illusion in L0 Shell. So I feel like the color on this is good for me, though today I do feel like it looks a little darker than it has Previously, like when I did the Get Ready With Me, I felt like it was a really nice shade match. Today in person, it's just looking kind of yellow, and it may be due to the fact that I used a different SPF underneath because I had such miserable wear with it the first time I tested it. I wanted to, since my face has gotten a little bit less dry, try my kind of tried and true SPF that's really good at holding foundation onto my face and keeping it looking really nice. The downside is that SPF does have a little bit of a tint to it that is darker than my skin tone. So as far as my skin type right now, well, I'm 39 years old. I have pretty dry skin on a good chunk of my face. I have kind of slightly oily forehead and nose, and then just around my mouth is just a mess. It's what tends to make product really break up and get patchy and separated and terrible looking. I also have some flakes due to seborrheic dermatitis underneath my lip and corners of the mouth and around my nose. So it can get really tricky to get foundation applied nicely and keep it looking good throughout the day because of those particular issues. I prefer to not use a primer if I can get away with it. I tested this with the e.l.f. Putty Primer and it made zero difference. For me, that one can sometimes keep foundation from breaking apart around my mouth, but this one didn't help. So that's why I decided to go ahead and look to see if I could change a skincare item. I exfoliated just using a washcloth, putting a cleansing balm on and then taking it off with a washcloth, and that kind of gives you a little bit of an exfoliation. And then a good amount of moisture, put on the Paula's Choice Super Light Daily Wrinkle Defense SPF 30 on top of that, let that sit down for a minute. It's almost a little bit smoothing on the pores, but it does have a little bit of a tint. Just, it's very subtle, but if you are my skin tone or lighter, and maybe a little darker as well, it's going to be a little bit darker than your skin. So just something to keep in mind. It's a beautiful SPF. It is consistently good at keeping foundation on my face and I love it, but there are a couple small downsides to it. You could see in the demo and when I zoomed in, I feel like it applied really nicely today for this foundation, but it definitely looks like makeup on your face. It's not a super natural finish. I feel like I can feel it a little bit. It just feels like I've got something on my face, and it feels like I'm kind of oily, though I don't think I really am all that oily. Though I did not put any highlight on my nose today and it's already looking kind of shiny. But I feel like the foundation is already holding up better than it did in that Get Ready With Me, which it was already starting to break down around 4 hours. It's been 4 hours and I feel like it's looking great still. So I'll zoom in real quick. So my trouble area is around my mouth and this is all looking just like I applied it. It's not creasing a bunch. And my smile lines. I noticed up here, I've got like a little dry flake somewhere up here, and you can't see it unless like I raise my eyebrows, and then you can see like the border of the flake. So it's actually sitting on top of that little dry, chunky flake of skin quite nicely. So that's pretty surprising. The only place that I put powder today was under my eyes and on my chin, and I used my new favorite powder, the Stellar Cosmic Face Haze Finishing Powder. It's the one that has a little bit of a pinky purple tint to it, but I don't find that it really shows up on your skin. And that for me and my very particular skin works just as well as the NARS Light Reflecting Setting Powder Pressed that I so love. I find that those are comparable products, but I would rather reach for the Stellar because I think it's going to last longer than the NARS Pressed Powder does. I do enjoy the shade on this. I feel like it's a nice undertone. I think this is going to be too dark for some people. I don't know that this range goes quite light enough because this is a little bit darker than some of the really good matches I have. Things like the Clinique Even Better and CN 0.5 is probably a good shade lighter than this. I am totally okay with wearing this color. The undertone is really good for me and it's a little bit darker, but I would honestly have my face be darker than my neck. In most cases, because if I go lighter on my face, then I feel like it looks very strange. So I would much rather have my face be a tiny bit darker. Naturally, my skin on my face is quite a bit darker than my neck. So I'm looking to just tone down the redness that's on my face, even things out and get it somewhere close to my neck. I am not looking for full coverage. I'm not looking to cover my freckles. Ideally, I would like something that's maybe just a smidge lighter coverage than this, because this is so full coverage that I find it tricky for me to get that light to medium coverage, which I feel like it's this kind of very fine line of being able to cover redness but not covering up my freckles too much. I don't have a ton of freckles visible like on my cheeks, but say my forehead has quite a few freckles, and on like the tops of my cheeks. So I like those to kind of shine through a little bit more. But I do feel like with not even a full pump and using a sponge, I'm getting, good solid medium plus coverage on this. And it definitely a little goes a long way without it being like really tricky to use. Like the Jouer high coverage cream, you get really good coverage, but since it's that super liquidy consistency and you only need the smallest drop, it's a little tricky to apply. Whereas I feel like this is a little bit more like kind of a traditional foundation formulation where you just need a little bit less, but it spreads out really easily and there's enough thickness there that I think it's relatively easy to apply with a sponge. Personally, I can't apply foundations with brushes. It just settles into my pores and kind of slides off the rest of my face, and just any little dry flakes it's gonna grab onto. Me and brushes do not get along, so I only apply either with my fingers or with a sponge. This kind of formula, I do feel like for me personally does benefit from a sponge application, because that's going to help shear it out a little bit and add a little bit of moisture in the whole process. And I definitely need that. I have a variety of kind of flaky skin patches that I might not even know are there with some foundations, and then I get another formula that really doesn't work with me and it's grabbing onto every single little dry flake on my face. Personally, I really dislike the scent. It's nothing wrong with the scent per se, but I associate it with being pregnant and having morning sickness. It's the same scent that was in Shape Tape concealer, and when I was pregnant with my third maybe, I did use Shape Tape a good amount until I just couldn't handle it anymore. And so now I kind of associate the smell of Shape Tape and Face Tape with being queasy, so that's a bummer. And plus, fragrance can be irritating to your skin, so if you are sensitive to fragrance, I would definitely probably steer clear of this. It is noticeable and it does dissipate, which is good. I don't feel like I can smell it throughout the day. With some foundations I definitely can smell it throughout the day, but this one doesn't do that. It does set down. If I have a lot of moisture underneath it on my skin, it doesn't quite fully set everywhere, but like my cheeks, it does definitely mostly set down. I can feel a little bit of drag. It's not like powder dry. But that again, I think is because I really moisturized before I put this on. When possible, I prefer to not powder my face, just because it really can accentuate the texture of kind of aging skin on me and just make me look a little bit older. So that's why, if possible, I'd like to avoid powder altogether. So I do enjoy foundation that really sets by itself and doesn't need a powder on top of it. But the real question is going to be, is it going to last better on my face with the minimal powder? I feel like the SPF is already helping a whole lot, so I really kind of, fingers crossed, I feel like this might possibly wear pretty well for me. All right, so I think that's all I wanted to cover right now, so I will be back later for a check-in so we can see how it's wearing. All right, so it's 8:46. I put this on around 11, so it's been almost 10 hours. Is that right? Yeah, almost 10 hours. It's definitely looking a lot better than it did in the last wear test that I did. It's starting to break down a little, look a little patchy, a little separated, but pretty similar to how a lot of foundations look at this point. So it's just kind of getting a little funky here and here. But I think from a regular distance it looks fine. I'm pretty shiny at this point, but I don't feel like I had any transfer. I was a little bit more careful to not, you know, have the baby getting his hands all over my face. So I'm gonna blot and then I'll be back. So I did have some transfer when I blotted, and I think that was mainly in my trouble area. So it did fine, like on my nose and forehead, which I think were oilier than my chin, but my chin, it just breaks up makeup really fast. And I think I also put a little bit of extra moisture on my chin because it's been very dry and flaky lately, so that probably has a part in that as well. But I think overall it did pretty well. I wouldn't, it's not like my best wearing foundation, I would say. It just looks a little bit heavy on my skin. I feel like it's wearable, but it is a little heavier than I prefer makeup to look on my face. So I would say this is not my favorite, but I do think that it wears nicely, and I like that it is a fairly good yellow undertone. So if you, I would say if NC10 is just a tiny bit dark for you in the Studio Fix Fluid line, then this might be a good, kind of a similar formula, just a tiny bit lighter after it dries down. And I don't think that the color changes throughout the day. I do feel like once it sets, it stays that color the rest of the day. And that's one of the things I struggle with the Studio Fix Fluid, is how it just continues to get darker throughout the day. So maybe it's something that I could try mixing something in that's a little bit more luminous, a little bit more, thin it out a little bit. And maybe get the color just a tiny bit lighter. I think that's what I would prefer to do. I also kind of wonder if this would mix well with the Estee Lauder Double Wear. The 0N1 Alabaster is a little bit too light for me and doesn't have enough of that warm undertone to it, so this might actually be a good candidate, since it's a similar type of formula, to try to mix a little bit of that into the Estee Lauder. So I'll definitely keep trying, playing around with it, see if I can find a combo of things that I like. And yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about for now. So thank you for taking the time to watch my video today. If you want to see more videos from me, please do subscribe, turn on the bell if you want a notification when I post a new video. I do a lot of foundation related stuff, pale skin type stuff, and I need to record an empties. That's been like on my list of things to do, and I keep not doing it. I've got my bag. The problem is I've got like 2 skincare items that I'm so close to finishing, and I just want to wait to finish them. But the pile is accumulating in the meantime. Anyway, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. I apologize for all of the craziness in the background. We've got a 5-year-old coughing. We've got wave sound machines from 3 different children. And I think my husband's singing a song to our 3-year-old right now. At least the baby's sleeping, you know? That's something.